Today we're going to talk about identity-based goals.
And how it's sometimes not a yes or no question as it relates to those goals.
We'll then talk about how we can shift our goals into a higher gear. Welcome to the Franken Life Podcast, where we are stitching together new ways of living our best lives. Welcome back. I'm Jeff.
And I'm Troy.
And today we're going to talk a little bit about goal setting.
And specifically, we're going to talk about the power of identity-based goals, or when those goals really are connected with the way that we view or define ourselves.
Yeah, so identity-based goals, as James Clear defines them in Atomic Habits, is instead of saying, I'm trying not to smoke, say, I'm not a smoker.
Right, where it's actually the way in which we sort of identify ourselves, or we define ourselves. And it's somewhat aspirational if it's a work in progress. Saying, I'm not a smoker while you're going through the process of quitting may feel aspirational, but it allows us to place ourselves where what we're trying to do or not do isn't in conflict with how we actually view ourselves.
Yeah, so he kind of talks about the benefits of it being that it allows you to frame your actions in, if you want to be a runner, is what I'm doing today what a runner would do in my mind? So eating a cookie versus eating a head of broccoli. What decision does a runner make? So having that identity allows you to frame that out.
Yeah, and I think that it contextualizes it too, because you can connect it to a couple other, behaviors or whatever else. I'm a runner, meaning I not only run, but I have some other health goals, or I'm trying to make my diet compatible with what a runner would eat. So it allows us to kind of contextualize behaviors and actions or avoidances based on that identity.
Yeah, but I don't think that this identity-based habit formation is necessarily a panacea. Just saying I'm a runner doesn't necessarily mean that tomorrow you're going to wake up and behave as a runner. Like you said, it's a little bit aspirational.
Yeah, and it sometimes feels, especially as we finished kind of going through Atomic Habits, as we've talked about before, loved it, but in practice, it felt like there was some of it where it was a little disingenuous, where it was almost seemed like a hack where you can kind of trick yourself into doing things. And I think the real power that lies in those identity-based goals isn't the trick, but the framing or the contextualizing that we're talking about.
Yeah. So recently, Ellie and I stopped drinking soda. And it started back in September when we were leaving on our 3-month trip. And really what it started as was we don't want to spend money on soda for the 3 months. It was already going to be a pretty expensive trip. So that was a good way to just drink water and cut back on some of those costs.
Right. So it was framed initially as, hey, we're sacrificing something that we maybe would want to do otherwise, money being no object, but we're sacrificing because there's some other priorities that we have for our money that we'd rather allocate those resources or that money to. So the habit had an intention, not an identity.
Yeah.
Is that fair?
Yeah. I mean, I guess if you wanted to frame it out as an identity, we're frugal people, so we don't drink soda. But really, that wasn't the purpose or the thought process behind it. It was really more of a means to an end than really like, hey, yeah, we're going to stop drinking soda. But when we got home from our trip, we started drinking some soda again. We went on a cruise as a family and just realized we don't need this in our lives. So by taking that intention-based or even maybe kind of utilitarian basis for that habit, it eventually developed into now, I will say, I'm not a soda drinker.
Right.
I don't necessarily mind it occasionally, but you and Ryan get drinks all the time for work, just going to the gas station, and I haven't gone in months.
Right. Right. And so that kind of moves into that next point of this notion of yes, no.
Yeah.
Are you a non-smoker, or are you a runner, or are you a soda drinker or not? And we think about it kind of in that binary, yes, no. And the reality is that there are some ways that we can incorporate incrementally some of the benefits of an identity-based habit formation without it being that question, or maybe feeling disingenuous that I'm a finished product, you know, that aspirational, I'm finished, I am a runner, you know. There are some increments, particularly when you find, you know, a value or a utility to that habit formation. That's sort of the intermediary step where you're saying we want to save money, whether it's an identity of I'm frugal or not. It does tie to something that has a connection to an identity.
Yeah.
You're wanting to go on a trip. You saved up money to do it. It fits into the identity or the purpose of that broader thing, and so it has that same punch or that same value, even though it doesn't demand that you say, I don't, you know, I'm not a soda drinker. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, it totally makes sense. And we kind of talked about kind of leveling up our habits, and it's kind of like riding a bike. The easiest gear is the first gear.
Yeah.
But if you just keep pedaling, eventually you're either going to burn out or you're going to need to switch up to gear 2. And that's kind of when we look at the soda drinking as an example. If we just said we're not going to drink soda for the rest of our lives because it's cost savings, I think there's a point at which cost savings is not enough of a reason to not drink soda.
Right.
So when we got home, we did transition back to soda drinking, but realized quickly that no, there's a new reason, a higher reason of health and just feeling better for not drinking soda.
Yeah.
So kind of like the gears of a bike, the more you step up the gear, the more power you're able to generate with a single habit.
Yeah, and I think that a little bit of the reverse is also an important kind of output of the metaphor of gears. If you think about it for a car, now driving a stick shift is a little bit of a lost art, you know, here in the States. You go to Europe, and of course they're all still driving stick. But for those of us that have, you know, driven a stick, you know, you put it in first gear to get started. But no matter how much you put down the gas, even if you floor it, there's a limit to how fast you can go in first gear. And I think that kind of talking about soda and sort of a frugality play, there's probably a limit to how much you can get there. And what I mean by that is when you introduce affluence, you know, suddenly I have a whole bunch of money. Well, that motivation no longer justifies not drinking. You sort of have to move it into another gear if the idea is to be a non-soda drinker. If that metaphor makes sense. Yeah.
But I think that there's the opposite of that is trying to start in sixth gear.
Totally.
And if you try and start a stick shift car in sixth gear, you'll stall. There's no question. I think that's really where Atomic Habits gets it right, is that the focus shouldn't be on the finished product of the habit, but what micro habits or what steps are the ones that get me there. Because, like that lady, her name's Christine, she gave a TED Talk about becoming a runner, and she would just run for 1 minute every day.
Right.
If she was going to run 1 minute every day for the rest of her life, I don't know that would make a colossal difference in her life. But that was simply the first step to becoming a runner, where she's running 15, 20, 30 minutes a day. And that leveling up the habit, you have to start small, but you also have to recognize that there's some runway that you're going to have to face.
Yeah, and I think that again kind of is an important thing to note. Getting back to this idea of the continuum of identity-based goals, she had an identity related to that 1 minute. You know, there was a reason, there was a purpose, there was something contextual about what she was trying to do. You know, whether it's a step in the process or I'm just going to do this because I'm going to do this thing. Whatever it is, there is an identity, and the better we get at sort of articulating or defining it or somehow just making it evident to us, we can leverage some of the power of identity-based goals at a much lower threshold of of commitment or of identification or whatever else. I don't have to say I'm a runner, but if I'm saying I run 1 minute a day. That is an identity.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That actually is an identity-based goal. If I'm really clear on saying not I'm going to run 1 minute a day, but I do run 1 minute a day.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if that distinction
No, it
makes
totally
sense
does.
or not,
I think that there is a real, and we've talked about it a lot on the podcast, is there's a real propensity for us to try and get to finished product from zero.
Yeah.
And breaking down.
Well, and before you leave that point, and that those are our two choices.
Yes.
It's either 0% or 100%.
Yeah. But then we talked about the comfort zone a couple of weeks ago, and how as soon as you take one step out of the comfort zone, now your comfort zone has expanded and you have the opportunity to grow in different ways.
Right.
So making those small adjustments and small identities allow us to eventually become the big identities.
Yeah, and I think kind of sticking with the comfort zone thing, that really is that gearing up that we're talking about. Exactly. You know, as we expand into our discomfort zone, or as we start building some of these smaller habits, these smaller identities, all of those increase our capacity for the next step. That is what that next gear looks like.
Yeah.
Is taking
and avoiding
those steps.
The panic zone is really where we say don't
go too far.
Yeah, don't go too far.
Yeah.
Saying I'm going to go out and run 5 miles every day. Ryan's brother-in-law runs 5 miles a day. If I were to say that, I just wouldn't get out of bed in the morning. There's no reason. That's panic for me.
Yeah.
So.
Well, that's interesting. I hadn't really thought about the idea that panic zone, which doesn't increase the comfort zone necessarily, really is an analog to this notion of overshooting with our habits. We go into a place where there isn't the kind of incremental growth or the progress because it's too far.
Yeah.
You know, and whether that's manifest in panic, which now I started scared of heights, I jumped out of a plane to skydive, and now I'm even more scared of heights because I got into that panic zone. Or I said, I'm going to run a marathon and go out and try to run 5 miles the first day. Either way, I'm setting myself up to not see the progress that, you know, ideally I'm hoping out of some of those actions.
Yeah, it's super fascinating, and it really is something that as we've started trying to implement some of these habits that we think are really important, like the daily reflection and check-in and planning, we've faced some serious challenges, and a lot of it's been because we've tried to go from 0 to 100,
right,
rather than figuring out what's the first step, what's the final step.
Yeah, and the other piece to that is not stagnating.
Yeah.
You know, as we were talking yesterday about our pit stops and how that's working for us, we've gotten good at doing that. We've gotten good at the sort of the 1 minute daily jog.
Yeah.
What's next? You know, if that's a habit that we're wanting to make even more effective in our lives, what's the next step? You know, let's just drop it a gear and maybe get a little bit more traction or a little bit more capacity for increasing our velocity or accelerating towards what we're trying to do. I think that's the other piece of it is evaluating, revisiting our habits and the things that we're working on to say, okay, now am I in a place where I can move a little bit faster? I can move up the identity chain, if that
I would
that
say
makes sense.
This is the perfect example because we've gotten the planning pretty good. That reflection is something that we've touted and said is important. That's the piece that's missing in order to level up, is really going back and evaluating. If you're running 1 minute a day every day, at what point do you evaluate and say, okay, is this doing what I want it to do anymore? Or am I just now going through the motions? Duolingo's the other great example of, am I learning Spanish or am I just getting on to check in for the day,
Correct.
keep my streak alive and beat the other people in my league? Like, what am I getting out of this habit? So I think that reflection is really such a key component of any habit development and habit leveling up.
Yeah, and I think that all of it becomes sort of, I mean, there's a synergy that we can create that as we improve in one of those areas of our habits, or one area of our lives, it does normally allow us to level up in some of the others as well.
Totally.
So, just reflection and planning. We're doing well in the mechanics of planning. Enhancing our reflection is the means to improve our planning. Right?
Yeah.
So and it would be the same way with jogging, Duolingo, whatever else, reflecting and kind of evaluating, am I still moving forward towards whatever forward looks like for me, or have my routines sort of moved me as fast as I can? Am I sort of flooring it in these current routines? Do I need to shift, to the next gear in order to, to accelerate? So I think it's a really interesting concept. And again, the idea of identity as a means of increasing our attachment to habits and to goals, super powerful. I think we can do a better job of making that more incremental.
Yeah, anything taken out of context or taken too far, just stops working the way it's supposed to. And
Agreed.
I think that's really where a lot of self-help books and self-help philosophies get a bad rap, is they are taken out of context of what has worked for the author. And in defense of authors, right, they've experienced the full fruition of their plan or whatever their self-help advice is, but they've also are at the end. They've
gone through the increments.
Yeah, no one's starting out writing a book and saying like, yeah, I'm going to work on this for the next 10 years, just documenting my process.
Right.
It's like, oh, looking back, that really worked. Yeah. And so some of the steps get left out and stuff. I think that's really the important thing to understand. And that's really what Austin Kleon's talking about in his book, Show Your Work, is really document your processes. And that's what we're trying to do.
The power in the increment.
Yeah, that there's power in the process, not just in the final destination.
Yeah.
So,
nope, great thought.
Well, thanks for listening today to us kind of talk about this and ramble on about habits.
And we'd love to know what habits you're working on, what's working for you. Any feedback that you get, we'd love to hear, and certainly any questions that are interesting for you as far as topics surrounding this. Let us know. We'd love to review that.
Yeah, you can reach out to us on any of the social media platforms we're on. All of our social media platforms are linked in the show notes for all of the podcast episodes. So you can connect with us there. You can also send us an email, and that email will be linked as well. But we do love to connect with people. We had a podcast episode earlier where Jack asked us a bunch of questions, and that was really fun to just discuss kind of topically relevant things for one of our listeners. So we're grateful for all of you coming in, tuning in every week, and we'll see you in the next one.
Take care.